you, but I'm Paul Peterson, and I'm here to keep things running, and I've enjoyed doing that, and I'm glad to see many of you here and our visitor Lynn Duncan. So you're all welcome. I don't have much of anything exciting for announcements. We've already talked a little bit about the auction coming up in June. We can do more if we need that later. Does anybody have anything right now that's important to pass on before we get on to our program? Okay, well, if not, then let me go through the bio. I'm so pleased to have Jim back. I was looking for, some speakers, and your name came up, and National Airmail Week, which I wanted to learn, and that's it. And especially the baby Zeps, you did a great job back in January. But Jim Haxby has an undergraduate degrees in chemistry and pharmacy and a PhD in pharmacology. He's been in medical research at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla, California, as well as a practicing pharmacist for 25 years. In the collecting arena, he has been a stamp collector for 77 years and a coin collector for about 72 years. Dr. Haxby has written several catalogs and books on Canadian coinage, tokens, and paper money, and is the author of a huge catalog, 72,000 entries and illustrations of U.S. obsolete paper money. He's a former deputy curator of the Canadian National Currency Collection at the Bank of Canada, a past president of the Asheville, North Carolina Coin Club, and as a director of the American Airmail Society and president of the Stamp Smarter Foundation, which is charged with preserving and furthering the website. And maybe as we talk, Jim, you can tell us a little bit more about Stamp Smarter, because I think people would be interested in what that does. And as I showed earlier, if you like stamps and coins, this is the book to get. James McKay, and it'll be on our auction block next month. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Haxby back with us again to talk about National Airmail Week in the United States. I think back in the 30s. You're all set, and then if you want to share your screen, and we will
Okay.
mute. Do you want questions during or after?
It doesn't really matter to me. I don't care.
Okay.
Um, I'll be moving fairly fast because
Okay.
I got a lot of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still interrupt me. It's okay. I don't mind.
Okay, good. So we know that.
Okay. So let's see. I haven't done this sharing for a while, so I got to remember how to do it. Uh, let's see. Now, can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
It's coming.
Okay.
We're
How's
good.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me see here. Gotta get down. Oops.
You had it. That was it. Yep.
Yeah, but I gotta get it started. Oops. Okay. Get back to here. Okay, but I gotta start slideshow. There we go. Okay,
Perfect.
good. Here is the title slide for my presentation today, National Airmail Week, More Than Meets the Eye. I think a lot of people think of National Airmail Week as a bunch of covers and an unknown huge quantity of covers, but with cachets on. But there's a lot more to National Airmail Week than just a bunch. And so I'm going to try to broaden your perspective on it and go into some detail about the kinds of cachets that we see on National Airmail Week covers. Now, by National Airmail Week, I'm talking about the 1938 National Airmail Week. You say, were there other National Airmail Weeks? Yes, there were. But none was as successful as the 1938 week, and especially in terms of the number of covers produced, which is, of course, of great philatelic interest to us. Now, the National Airmail Week was conceived by Postmaster General James A. Farley, who served from 1933 to 1940 under FDR. He conceived it, and it was first and foremost a massive public relations campaign. It nominally marked the 20th anniversary of the first scheduled airmail service in the United States, but it was far more than just a simple historical celebration. It was a calculated, highly coordinated effort to restore public faith in commercial aviation, to stabilize a fragile postal economy. Remember, this was still in the Depression, and integrate the isolated communities of rural America into a rapidly modernizing global network. Now, I talked about the fact that it was calculated to restore public faith in commercial aviation. And during the 1930s, commercial aviation took some serious hits. And I'm going to mention a couple of those events that caused people to think twice about flying. The first one involves this fellow at the left. And of course, we all recognize him as Newt Rockne, the famous football coach for Notre Dame. 1st of 1931, he was aboard one of these planes, the Fokker F-10 tri-motor, and he was flying on a flight from Kansas City to Los Angeles. And the weather was clear. It was no clouds around, beautiful sky, and without any warning, the plane fell out of the sky and killed everybody on board. So an air crash was one thing when it killed people of no status, as it were, but when it killed somebody famous, that really got public attention. The reason why it turned out that plane fell out of the sky was because it was partly made out of wood, and there were wood spars in the wings, and part of that got water in it and rotted, and so the wing collapsed and the plane just fell out of the sky. Below is a cover related to another incident that damaged public confidence in commercial aviation, and that's related to the what's called the airmail scandal. The Roosevelt administration, when they came in early 1933, received a number of complaints. There had been ongoing complaints about malfeasance in the issuing of contracts by the government to private airlines for carrying airmail. At that time, all the airmail was carried by private airlines on government contract. And there were claims that government officials had been involved in malfeasance, as well as executives of the airlines. And so it was determined that there was enough truth to this that Roosevelt directed Farley to cancel all the airmail contracts and turn the carrying of the airmail over to the Army. And so this is one of the first flight covers. This is from Salt Lake City, where the Army is. It turned out to be a disaster because the Army was not really well suited for carrying the airmail because they didn't have the right planes and the pilots weren't adequately trained, and it was one of the worst winters in decades. And so within a matter of weeks, there were many crashes and 12 pilots were killed. And furthermore, two prominent members of the public associated with the airlines stood up and were screaming at the government for doing this crazy experiment. And those two people were Charles Lindbergh, who permanently became an enemy of FDR thereby, and the president of Eastern Airlines, who happened to be a fellow named Eddie Rickenbacker, who was famous for his exploits in World War I. So between the two of them and other things, the commercial airline industry was in the 1930s, and it was determined that it would be important for if the commercial aviation was to grow and survive, that it needed to become an indispensable utility for the masses. And so the post office needed some kind of grand gesture to prove that flying was safe, reliable, and essential to modern commerce. And so National Airmail Week came into existence. National Airmail Week was designated as May 15th to 21st. And it involved a massive public relations campaign. Farley was the honorary chairman of National Airmail Week, but the executive chairman was the also a very good administrator, was a fellow named Paul Yonts, who was an army man, an ex-army man, and he was at the time, the postmaster of the Charlotte, North Carolina post office. And so this public relations campaign involved all of the available media for the 1930s. So there were radio broadcasts. Radio stations had speeches by aviation pioneers. There were dramatic reenactments of early airmail flights and daily reminders to use airmail. Print media, there were many newspaper articles, cartoons, advertisements, and so on. We can see in the upper left corner of this slide, there was a slogan, "Cancel," ahead of National Airmail Week, reminding people to use airmail. And of course, that you can see that's canceling a 2-cent stamp, so that's on a not on an airmail letter, it's on a regular letter. There were buttons, like on the lower left, put wings on your mail. And on the right, we see an example of one of the many kinds of contests they had. On the right, it's a contest for the best cachet for Connecticut in this case. What's that?
Was there a question for Jim? I guess not. Go ahead.
Yes, not. Okay. So anyway, that's an example of contest, but there were contests in the schools where there were essay and poster contests that were organized for public schools. Children wrote about the history of transportation, and the winners got free flights or cash prizes. And so it effectively turned the nation's youth into ambassadors for aviation, carrying the message home to their parents. The visual centerpiece of the campaign was a new 6-cent airmail stamp, bicolored, with a patriotic eagle in the center. And that stamp, the first day of issue, was on May 14th, the day before National Airmail Week started. And there were two cities, day of issue, Dayton, Ohio, which was where the Wright brothers lived, and St. Petersburg, Florida, which was where the first commercial airline conducted business in the early 1920s. So many of the National Airmail Week covers, not all of them by any means, but many of them had the new 6-cent bicolor stamp. And that was designed by President Roosevelt, by the way. Now, there were lots of cachets on the National Airmail Week covers, and that was one of the most brilliant marketing strategies of the program, was the introduction of these localized cachets. You can see this cachet is a little city in Pennsylvania. You might have heard of it. And the idea was to get a cachet that extolled the virtues of each of the issuing cities. We'll talk about how they did that, and it engendered a feeling of patriotism, as it were, for the localities. So one of the great classes of National Airmail Week covers that we see are covers for individual cities in the 48 states. The next group is for the territories. The territories, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and so on, also had celebrated National Airmail Week. This one is from Puerto Rico. Then we have any of the military bases that had post offices. In this case, our example is Fort George Meade in Maryland, could celebrate National Airmail Week, and even Navy ships that had post offices could also have National Airmail Week covers. This one is from the USS Lexington, the aircraft carrier. And finally, another group is businesses. Some businesses actually produce their own National Airmail Week cover designs. This one, which I think is really striking, is from the Phillips packing company that made Phillips soups. And in the right of the face of the envelope there, it tells us also that this cover was flown by Mrs. Theodore Phillips. So she obviously was a pilot and owned a plane. Here is the picture that we talked about before, with Farley sitting with God knows how many thousand envelopes he received during National Airmail Week that were written to him. There were also a bunch that were sent to President Roosevelt, and a number of those have been preserved in his library and can be seen online. But this group, this picture with Farley is amazing. One of them, some of these are fairly large covers, and one of the most interesting covers I've never seen a picture of, there probably isn't one, but I have to tell you about it. A fellow made sandwich boards, enclosed his son in sandwich boards, and put stamps, glued stamps on them. He was weighed at the post office to get his weight, and he glued the required amount of postage on his son. So he made a cover out of his son and flew him in his plane for National Airmail Week. So that's the most unusual one I've seen. Now, National Airmail Week was a resounding success. You can see that by all these letters here, but it was a tremendous success for the country and for the post office. During the week, more than 16 million pieces of airmail were sent across the country, and some individual cities posted staggering numbers. For example, Chicago alone processed over 1 million pieces of mail during National Airmail Week. And that surge in volume generated immense revenue for the post office department through the sale of that 6-cent Eagle stamp. And more importantly, it permanently altered the baseline consumption habits of the American public. So many businesses that had previously relied on standard rail mail realized that the overnight delivery offered by airmail drastically accelerated their billing cycles and contract signings and ordering process. And so once the convenience of airmail was experienced firsthand, it became a standard business practice for many businesses, and individual people started thinking in those terms too. So it was an outstanding success. Now, one of the features of National Airmail Week that made it so successful was the idea of the pickup flight. Now, what that meant was that airmail was directly picked up from many locations that it had ordinarily was not. So, for example, this map here is the domestic airmail system in 1938. And you can see all those cities marked. Those are the stops on the airmail routes where the planes stopped to pick up the airmail. If you lived in a city or town that was not one of those stops and you sent an airmail letter, what would happen is that the letter would go by surface mail to the nearest regular airmail stop, and then it would be on the airplane and fly. And so what they conceived was that they would add many more cities to the system where the mail would leave that city by plane, and that would be called a pickup flight. Now, in North Carolina, for example, at that time, there were 3 cities that were regular airmail stops: Charlotte, Greensboro, and Raleigh. And all the rest of these cities on here are so-called pickup cities, where a plane picked up the mail from that city and then flew it to the nearest one of those 3 regular airmail stops. And this excited people greatly because they had a big ceremony. The plane would come in and land, and there'd be a ceremony there. The mayor would be there, the postmaster would be there, and maybe a band, and the mail would be trotted out to the plane, and it would take off. And in many cases, that would be the first time that town had ever had airmail leaving by plane from the city. So that made people very happy to see that. There are 2 kinds of arrangements for pickup cities. The first kind looks like this, where there's a central city. The central city is the regular airmail stop. And then there were like arms out. And so each of those dots is a town. And so the plane would be, for each of these flights, would be pre-positioned at the end, at the farthest city away from the regular airmail stop. And so it would pick up the mail there, then it would fly to the next town, get their mail, fly to the next town, and so on, and then deliver it at the end to the regular airmail stop. Each of those cities is called a pickup city because, again, they're getting their mail picked up and taken away by plane. Also, all around here, there are other towns that want to participate in National Airmail Week. And what they would do is they would run their mail by car or whatever to the nearest pickup stop and deliver their mail to them, and then it could get on that pickup flight from that other town. So that's how we ended up creating so many different cachets and so many towns participating in National Airmail Week. The other system that we see, the mail routes look like petals of a flower. It's a little hard to see, and I'll trace one out for you here. This is for central Nebraska, and so Grand Island, the one right in the center, is the airmail stop. And so there are 6 different routes that are feeding into that stop. In this case, since it's like a clover leaf, the plane doesn't start out at the farthest city away. It starts out at the airmail stop, the regular airmail stop. So this on Route 4 here, for example, the plane flies first to Minden, then to that next city, and Alma and Franklin, and then back. So it flies like outlining a petal. And so there were 6 different flights here in central Nebraska to capture all those stops. Now, the planes that were used for the pickup mail were mostly, well, I'm talking about the pilots first. The pilots, most of the pickup pilots, they were not regular airline personnel. They were private citizens. And so the government got private citizens to volunteer to be post office employees for one day. And so this fellow right here is a typical example of one of the pilots from some town in Maine, and his load turned out to be 868 pieces that he carried. Not all the pilots were relatively unknown. This pilot here, who flew around Long Island, I don't know how many of you recognize him, but he's a famous guy, Roger Wolfe Kahn. Roger Wolfe Kahn was the son of a millionaire, and he was very interested in aviation, and he was interested in music too. And if you look up, you'll find that he had his own orchestra in the 1920s. And I've heard recordings of stuff that he recorded. Anyway, he was very interested in aviation. He eventually became a test pilot and an executive for, I think it was Grumman. So he flew one of the pickup flights. Another guy who was famous was a racing pilot named Frank Hawks. And here's a picture of Frank with one plane that he flew for Texaco. And Frank had a route in Connecticut, and there were a couple of cities, more than a couple, but there were 2 instances of cities where he stopped where they put on his facsimile of his signature. Bethel, Connecticut, where P.T. Barnum was born, and Danbury, Connecticut. Now, the planes that were used for these pickup flights were mostly small planes that were owned by various individuals. And the one on the left is a plane that was used in Massachusetts, and the one on the right, the pilot's name was Wilbert. I'm not sure what the rest of it was, but he was in Forest Park, Illinois. So they were mostly small planes because they weren't taking huge loads of mail. However, there were some large planes used for some of these pickup flights, and I've got some of them across the bottom. Sometimes DC-3s were used. DC-3s, by that time, 1938, they were only introduced about 2 years earlier, but by 1938, they'd already become the majority of the commercial airliners in service. And so they were very ubiquitous. Then there's another plane that was nicknamed the Bird that was used in Altadena, California. And this one a four-engine job looks like it's a military plane, and it was used to pick up the mail in Woburn, Massachusetts. The reason why they were able to do so many pickup flights was because they were willing to accept flights into and out of wherever a plane could be landed. That could be a farmer's field. These guys with this plane are standing here in a field. It could be in a farmer's field. It could be on a road. It could be on a beach. For Belmer, New Jersey, it was on a beach. An amphibious plane flew around New Hampshire area. So wherever a plane could possibly be landed, they were willing to accept that for these pickup flights. Now, the recognition of the pickup flights took place on May 19th, Thursday of National Airmail Week. But people could mail National Airmail Week covers all during the week. It's just that they wouldn't end up on a pickup flight if they didn't get mailed on the 19th. And sometimes the pickup flight was noted on the cover. This is a cover from Marquette, Michigan that was sent up day, but there's no indication of the pickup flight on this cover. So some covers had no indication. In the extreme case, the cachet only refers to the pickup flight. So it doesn't say anything about National Airmail Week. It just says special airmail flight. Here's a case from Pennsylvania, from Coatesville, where the cachet for National Airmail Week, the magenta one down below, is separate from a little extra stamped cachet up top that was put on for the pickup flight. So two separate cachets. And finally, we have a cachet that's so complicated that it's got reference to both the fact that there's going to be a pickup flight there and it's celebrating National Airmail Week. So both are included in the same cachet. Now, there were some special flights during National Airmail Week that were not just pickup flights from one city to that didn't ordinarily have air service to another city that was one of the regular airmail stops. And two of these occurred as indicated by these cachets here. The first was in Dayton, Ohio. They flew to Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, of course, is where the Wright brothers first flew. And then the second one there is Kitty Hawk, and they flew back to Dayton. Then we have another flight that was from Barberton, Ohio, and that, instead of going to a regular airmail stop, went to Kitty Hawk. So that's not a regular pickup flight. And finally, we have a flight that took place, or two flights, in Iowa, Cedar Falls to Waterloo and back. They were following the route that a aviation pioneer, Lincoln Beechey, flew in 1912. Now, not every post office was either flush enough or imaginative enough to have a special cachet for their town. So we have a group of cachets that I call general cachets, that are usable by a number of different towns. And this particular one in the upper left here is for North Carolina. And the North Carolina chairman of National Airmail Week circularized all the postmasters and said, if you can't figure out a cachet, we've got one that you can use and just plug the name of your town in and a little slogan for the town. And so a number of the North Carolina towns used that Watch Airmail Grow cachet. Here's a similar Connecticut where the main blue part of it was printed, and then the town could print its slogan and name in a little area near the top. There's one for Idaho where a little bullseye showed the location, approximate location of the town, and then the name of the town was below. That's Idaho Falls in that case. There's one for Pennsylvania. The name of the town appears at the bottom. And I've got a number of cities that use that cachet for Pennsylvania. And finally, here's one that is not local at all. It could be used by any city in the country just by plugging in its name at the bottom. Then we have some general cachets where the cachet does not change. The design is locked in, but it is good for 2 or more cities. This one is one of my favorites. It's a Minnesota cachet for the towns of Franklin, Delano, and Roosevelt. Those 3 towns are all in Minnesota. And so they cleverly designed a cachet. They went together and designed a cachet with Roosevelt's image on and the city names on there with their locations. And so that could be used by any of those 3 towns. And I have them all, have covers with all of them. The dirty little secret is, though, that those names do not refer directly to Roosevelt. Franklin was named after Benjamin Franklin. Roosevelt was named after Teddy Roosevelt, and Delano was named after a railroad worker and banker in the town. The next one is a county cachet. So that's good for any town in Sullivan County, Pennsylvania. And there are some other cachets for Pennsylvania that are county cachets as well. For example, Carbon County. Here's one that is good for the entire state of California. Any city in California can use it. That particular one was used by Fullerton. Notice the tuna cans on the back. I think the California chairman got the makers of the tuna to print the covers, and so they got the image of their cans on the back as advertising to compensate them for printing the covers for free. Now, of those cachets that were produced specifically for individual towns, not general ones, there are several different types, and I'll go through these so you get an idea of what kinds of groups you'll encounter. The first one is an example of a general promotion of the Postal Service, or it mentions only National Airmail Week and either doesn't mention the city name or certainly doesn't promote it. It's mostly historical of the Postal Service, that one. The next one talks about current attributes of the city that would make it desirable for people to go there or make it interesting. This is Alexandria Bay, New York, where Bolt's Castle is, which is a great tourist attraction in the Thousand Islands. Next one is from Oregon, Bend, Oregon, which is in eastern Oregon. And there are three mountains that are together there, close in close proximity, that are called the Three Sisters, and they are one of the geographical features that make that area interesting. And of course, who a cover from the hub of Oildom, Oil City, Pennsylvania. And Hayward, California, we can see at the bottom that is the city of industry and agriculture. So that's a nice plug for the city. And finally, here's one that does double duty. It not only plugs National Airmail Week, but it plugs another event that is either currently occurring or is going to occur in the near future. In particular, it's Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's talking about National Airmail Week on the left, and then at the bottom and the right, covered wagon days that were going to take place in July. So it's an ad for the covered wagon days as well as talking about National Airmail Week. Then there are the covers that associate the town with a historical event or place. This is one of my favorite cachets from Abilene, Kansas, and we see the visage of Wild Bill Hickok on the right there, and one of the other sheriffs, Tom Smith, on the left. This one from Hutchinson, Minnesota, talks about a famous group of concert singers, the Hutchinson brothers, who were very popular in the 1850s and sang early barbershop. The next one from Little Falls, Minnesota, obviously our hometown boy. Lindbergh grew up in Little Falls, Minnesota, so they had to talk about him. Then we have Provincetown, Massachusetts, the first landing place of the Pilgrims. And from Pennsylvania, from Albertus, we see an image of the first cook stove in America, 1734. And finally, from Appomattox, Virginia, we see McLean's house, where, of course, the surrender took place in the Civil War. Sometimes, not commonly, but sometimes we see a town having more than one cachet. And here's Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, with two different views of airplanes on their printed cachets, on their pre-printed envelopes. More often, when there is a pair of cachets associated with a town, it's like this case where for Fairhaven, Massachusetts, where there is a week and a second cachet, in this case smaller, for the pickup flight. So you'd only see the second cachet on the cover if it were done on pickup day, when that was going to be picked up by the plane. I'm going to show you a couple of more examples of where there is a separate cachet for the regular airmail week and the pickup day. In these cases, the cachets are of equal weight, that is, they're equal size. So this is Twin Falls, Idaho. This is the regular one for the whole week. And there's the one for the pickup flight. And here's Lawrence, Kansas, for the cachet for the whole week. And then the one at the bottom for pickup day. that pickup day cachet is one of my favorites. That Jayhawk, the expression on the Jayhawk's face is priceless. As I mentioned, the post office had to find money for, or find groups to pay for the production of the cachets. And these people who paid for them were called sponsors. And the sponsors were various. They could be the postmaster, could be civic groups, or in this case, like in Newburyport, Massachusetts, it could be the Stamp Club. So on the bottom, we see the Newburyport Stamp Club sponsored this one. The middle one for Lancaster, Massachusetts, the sponsor was a fellow named H. Guy Loverin. And we see at the bottom that he was a manufacturer of fine cast bullets. If you're interested in fine cast bullets, there you go. And finally, this cachet from Montague is interesting in that most of the cachet is actually for the sponsor. And the part that refers to the National Airmail Week is shoved up to the top. The sponsor is the Montague Rod and Reel company that manufactured split bamboo rods for fly fishing. Now, there are various methods that were used to print the cachets on the covers. And the first one is by printing press, letterpress printing. In this case, it's a fancy one that was two color. So the envelope was pre-printed and before National Airmail Week. And so those pre-printed envelopes were sold to the public, advertised by the post office or others. And sometimes groups of them were deposited at various stores in town, so people could have various places to go to get them before National Airmail Week. And so they could use those for the National Airmail Week. Another way, again involving a regular printing press, was to pre-print gummed labels and then stick the label on the envelope. So that one is a pre-printed label. And here's another one involving the printing press, but this is a variation. This is called thermographic printing. In thermographic printing, the image is printed with a press in the regular way, and then while the ink is still wet, it's dusted with a special powder, reacts with the ink to make it swell. And so when it dries, and it's heated, and when it dries, it has a tactile feeling. And it's been, thermographic printing has been called the poor man's intaglio. But that's an extra step and more expensive. And you don't see many covers that have thermographic printing. Then there's lithography. This is an especially nice example of lithography because it's multicolored lithography for Denver. Then there's a pretty low class one. We've all seen that in school, mimeographed. Then the most common one, rubber stamped. This is a beautiful cachet for San Juan Capistrano. I have a picture of me when I'm a little kid standing in front of that place. I don't know if the swallows were coming in at that time, but I was standing there anyway in the sun. And finally, occasionally we run into hand-drawn cachets. And they're always fun to collect. Here's one of the original rubber stamps that was used for, in this case, Irving, New York. And on the right-hand side, I show what the face of the stamp looks like, but that's not quite right, of course, because I have flopped the image so you can read it. The image actually is backwards on the stamp. But that's what the post offices were using. So when people would send the mail to the post office, they would, if it didn't have a cachet on it already, they would stamp it during National Airmail Week. Now, I've talked about the fact that cachets could be pre-printed and they could be rubber stamped. And there are some, in some cases, we find that both versions exist for a given town. Here, for example, in Herndon, Pennsylvania, the upper black one is the pre-printed one, and the bottom is the rubber stamp. Identical designs. The reason why they can be identical is because in the process of making the rubber stamp, there is a metal intermediate, so they can make a metallic intermediate that could be used for printing and go on and make a rubber stamp of the identical design that could be used for stamping. Now, here's a case where from Erie, Pennsylvania, where the printed version at the top is not identical to the rubber stamp at the bottom. You see the difference in the ships? And the reason for that is because in the upper printed one, that ship is a lithographed. It's a halftone. So they couldn't do that in the rubber stamp. So they had to find another ship that could be incorporated into the rubber stamp. And here's another example where the printed version and the stamped version are different. In this case, quite dramatically different for Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where the design part of it, with the wise men, is much larger in the rubber stamp than it is in the printed version. Now, we just looked at the printed version and the rubber stamp version for some post offices. Here is a case where there are 3 versions for a post office. It's the only case I have found so far, and it's for Sydney, New York. The first one that we see here is a label, a pre-printed label. Here's the same image printed directly on the cover, and the one below is the rubber stamp. The rubber stamp was in really good shape when it made that. I had to look carefully to convince myself that that was a rubber stamp on the bottom. So 3 cases. So if you want to be a cataloger like me, you've got to catalog all that stuff. And it expands the number of covers or items considerably, all these varieties. Another thing that is fun to collect is ads or circulars from cachet makers. There were these cachets had to be, the good ones had to be made by professional cachet makers. This particular brochure that was sent out to postmasters is from the Hoff Rubber Stamp Company in Minneapolis. And interestingly, I've been trying to collect, well, I try to collect all the different National Airmail Week covers I don't have anyway, but I've been specifically trying to collect all the covers, all the cachets that are in this ad, and I've got quite a number of them. There's an interesting one that is by a company in Buffalo that is a cachet manufacturer. It is a mock cachet. It's an ad for their company, and I have that on a cover that has the regular Buffalo National Airmail Week cachet, and it has this one too for the maker of the cachet. Another way that people collect National Airmail Week covers is collecting ones that represent unusual and novel things. For example, we have novel means of getting the mail to the pickup mail plane. The one on the left it went by Pony Express. And the one on the right from Rangeley, Maine, the mail was carried by reindeer team. Sometimes the aircraft involved were novel. The one on the left from Syracuse, New York, is an old early biplane, mail plane, and they even painted the pickup date on the plane, May 19th, 1938. Wallingford, Pennsylvania, the pickup flight from Wallingford to Philadelphia went via autogyro. And finally, from San Diego, part of the mail was delivered to Julian by parachute. Here's more novel stuff. The one on the left is from KEX, which is a big radio station, like 50,000 watts, that I used to listen to in Portland, Oregon. And they set up a post office in the radio station. And it was open from 11 o'clock to midnight on 4 different days. So you could go in there and there would be this special cachet on the letters. The one on the right is from Washington, D.C., from the so-called flagship station. And that was a DC-3 that they had taken the wings off of. And so the fuselage of the DC-3 served as the post office during that time. So you could go in and mail letters from there. Then if you were in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is has the original Pony Express stables, on May 16th, you could get your letter canceled in the stables. So they canceled them right in the stables. And the other days, they took that cancellation logo off the bottom, and the rest, the cachet looked the same, except without that. And then we have a couple of cachets that are made of unusual material. In the center one from Messina, New York, Messina was the world's largest producer of aluminum. And so I think they impregnated the ink with aluminum and for printing the cachet on the cover. And the one on the right is really unusual. Butte, Montana rolled out copper, very thin copper, that they then printed their cachet on and then glued it to the envelope. So it's a copper cachet. Then we have some very unusual covers. The first one is from Washington, Pennsylvania, and I point out that there is a 5-cent stamp on that cover and a 1-cent stamp. And of this type of cover, all of them have that. And you say, well, why not the National Airmail Week stamp? Well, it's because when this cover was mailed in 1930, and the usual airmail stamp was the beacon stamp. And so that cover was mailed to the post office in 1930 for another reason. It was mailed there, as is explained in the box below on the back. It was mailed there for the dedication, the upcoming dedication of the Washington, Pennsylvania airport. Well, it turns out the airport didn't get finished. And so those covers sat there for 8 years. And so the post office decided to use them for National Airmail Week. So the post office stuck that additional 1-cent stamp on and slapped the cachet on it and sent them on. Now, there are actually some Washington, Pennsylvania covers without the inscription on the back and with the National Airmail Week stamp. Those were mailed in 1938 for National Airmail Week. But most of the covers from Washington, Pennsylvania are like this because apparently a lot of people mailed them covers for the airport dedication. Then we have, again, our Messina, New York cover. The reason why I show it here is because it is the only crash cover in the National Airmail Week series. That plane crashed, and the pilot was uninjured. And we see on the bottom a card that was sent to the customers the post office knew had bought those covers, explaining that that cover had been in a crash and telling them that we believe that this circumstance will make this cover even more distinctive. So that is the one crash cover from National Airmail Week. Then we have, for those people who are into minutia, we have different colors of cachets in some cases. In the case of Detroit, we see all the cachets displayed on a post office sheet of paper. There are 2, 4, 6, 8 different cachets, different colors. And in the lower left, we see the printed color, which is the one that was on the pre-printed envelopes, and that's dark blue. The other 7 colors are for rubber stamps that were used during the week. And depending on what day of the week it was, that particular color was used. So the lighter blue was used on Sunday, then Monday was red, and so on. And we also have what are called combination color cachets, where the cachet, the rubber stamped cachet, is multiple colors. And that is achieved by inking the stamp pad for the rubber stamp with those different colors. And so this cachet for St. Petersburg comes in various colors, including more than one different kind of combination color. But there are some that are solid colors as well. So if you want to collect all those, you got a challenge. And then there's a group that I call the unfortunates in a way. It makes you wonder why the people chose them, why the town chose them. In this case, for Fitchburg, Massachusetts, we have what looks like a big russet potato in the middle. But in fact, it's not. It's a rock. It's a boulder called the Rollstone Boulder. And that boulder, for many, many years, sat outside of town near a marble quarry. And the marble quarry was gradually encroaching on the boulder. And so the citizens of the town moved the boulder to the center of town and put it in a square in the center of town. And it turns out that boulder was not a local boulder. It didn't originate there. It was brought there during the Ice Age by the glaciers moving. So they moved that rock to the place outside of town, and then the townspeople moved it to the center of town. But I'm not sure. It seems a bit strange to commemorate a rock. And this one is a rather strange design. It's an orange tree in the bottom, and then what looks like telephone poles or crosses. And then it looks like the airplane has crashed. And that's certainly not a good advertisement for National Airmail Week with the plane looking like that. I think the designer had some kind of, psychotic break or something during the design process. Then we have Connellsville, Pennsylvania, where they show us a vignette with a fellow named Colonel William Crawford, and he has been invited to an Indian barbecue, and he is the subject of the barbecue, the barbecuee. And he and several of his men who were captured by the Indians, who were mad at the Americans for some Indians being killed earlier, they burned him at the stake. So and to make it even worse, we have a bicolored cachet with the burning part red. Then we have a couple of Pennsylvania towns, um, South Fork and Johnstown, commemorating the Johnstown flood. Um, the one on the left shows the dam, and which burst in 1889, killing over 1,000 people. And so we see the dam on the left, and on the right, we see the cemetery with 777 unknown bodies. So I don't think either one of those is a great uh, tourist attraction for these towns. Now I want to talk a bit about cachets, because cachets are separate cachets, that is. Cachets are a very important part of National Airmail Week collecting. The first group of three here is the only cachets that would actually have been used on directly on the covers. These are labels, cachet labels, and I've already talked about um, the labels being pre-gummed and then stuck on the covers. And I thought these were three really nice examples. The first one is from Norwich, New York, and has the Falcon, the plane of this guy, Warren Eaton, who was the founder and first president of the Soaring Society of America, and it's in the Smithsonian. Then in the middle, Gresham, Oregon, that's a very colorful one that also advertises the Multnomah County Fair. That's one of those double duty ones. And then the one on the right from Idaho is a very pretty design with an Indian for Pocatello, I think. Now we get to cachets that were not intended to be used on the envelopes. The cachet was used on the envelopes, but these prints weren't. This one is a specimen produced by the manufacturer, and the manufacturer's little seal is up top, Yoakum's Fine Writing Tools in Massillon, Ohio. Beware of people advertising cachet proofs, because they're almost always wrong. Cachet proofs tend to be on special paper, like surface coated paper, for example. Some that I've seen that I'm satisfied are real proofs. And most of them that you see on eBay that are called proofs are no such thing. Then there were some cachet prints that were used, I believe, in post office displays. One of the big things that post offices did during National Airmail Week was to display cachets, not only that were being used in their town, but other towns around. And there was a special form that was made, post office form that was made for that, on card, white card. And you can see an example of this for Findlay, Ohio, where the cachet is stamped in the middle, and then the name of the town is stamped or written up top on the line. Then there's a similar one, a different kind of form, but the same purpose. This one is for Hamilton, Montana. I have seen in an article that the author thought that these were for exchanging between postmasters. I don't believe that was true at all. I believe that those were specifically for displays in the post office. They're not that common, and there's another cachet form that is much commoner that I believe, and I know in many cases I have proof that they were used for trading between postmasters. And I'll show you that in a minute. Then when customers would write to the post office for a sample of the cachet, the postmasters often obliged, and they used various forms for doing that. Here's one on post office letterhead where the postmaster simply stamped the cachet and then signed it. Here's a plain card where the postmaster stamped it. Also, they used index cards, and I've seen one case where the postmaster, the cachet was small enough, he stamped it on his business card. and sent his business card. So you find all kinds of things like that. Now, for trading between themselves, postmasters were very interested as a group in the cachets. And so there was a great deal of trading going on between postmasters. That I've seen a number of collections of cachets that belong to postmasters. And so there were various forms that they used for trading. This is one where the cachet was stamped on, in this case, it's the 3x5 card, but I've seen it stamped on penny postcards and sent to the other postmaster. But this is by far the commonest. The paper involved here is banding paper, and very common in the post office. It was there always, and they used it for banding mail bundles and so on. And it's a limp paper, a soft paper that's manila. And these things are, since they're soft and bend easily, they're called flimsies. So that's the nickname for these. And flimsies as a group are very, very common. And so I think a lot of postmasters sent these back and forth. Stick them in an envelope and so on. Stamp your cachet on it. So, and if you see flimsies offered in on eBay, for example, some of the optimistic sellers will try to get the same amount of, ask the same amount of money for a flimsy as they do for a full cover. They're not worth anything like what regular covers are worth. They're worth a fraction of it. And whenever I get National Airmail Week covers, if they're sealed, I open them because you never can tell what you're going to find. For one thing, they more often than not, they have cardboard stiffeners in them, and that cardboard is low quality and is damaging the paper. And so it's better to get that cardboard out. And so I carefully open them. But sometimes there are really interesting things, really interesting enclosures in these things. And here are two examples of enclosures that were put in to advertise the city. The left one is Messina, New York, that aluminum capital again. So that talks about their production of aluminum. Then the next one is from Dedham, New York, and extols the virtues of Dedham. Then we have one that is a card that is a political card. It's this fellow was running for county commissioner. And so I have found a number of these cards in various covers from cities in the county he was in Maine. And so he was running for county commissioner on an election on June 20th. And so I looked him up, and it looked like he had a successful political career. So I would suspect that he won that election. So that's pretty interesting to manage to get cards in to advertise for a political race. So that is just about everything I have to say. Gosh, I talked a long time, didn't I? I will quit and let you ask questions, if any of you are still awake.
Thank you. Questions, people?
Jim,
No questions.
I will say that I learned what I wanted to learn about National Airmail Week. I didn't realize what a scope it had, from
Yeah.
advertising to political candidates to changing, exchange between postmasters and,
Yeah.
federal, state, different kinds of cachets, stamped, printed, glued on. Now, were
I
those the
have,
only were those three that you showed which were glued, lick and stick? Are they the only three that you saw?
Oh, no, I have lots of them.
Okay, gotcha. Uh-huh. Okay.
Those are three of the nicest.
Okay, yeah, they were.
See,
Yeah.
see, I collect everything. I collect correspondence. I collect labels, cachet labels. I collect um um flimsies. I collect varieties, color varieties and so on. Because I hope to do a catalog at some point. And
Mhm.
and so there
Nice.
are a lot of covers, and one will never get them all.
Uh,
No. And
Uh,
Jim, you have a question?
Yes, do you have anything on the total number of crashes that may have occurred in Airmail Week?
you're breaking up. I didn't quite understand. Will you ask me again?
Oh,
There you go.
any better now?
Yep.
Yes,
Yes, the total number of crashes that should have perhaps occurred during Airmail Week.
one.
Only one?
Yeah, just that one. That Messina cover I mentioned.
Hmm.
Crashed near Lowville, which was about 90 miles away. Yeah, it was amazing because there were a lot of flights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions, folks? This is the time. Did anybody bring or have your own airmail covers to show on screen share?
Oh, 1 second. Jim, the the paperwork by Farley getting this going, do you have a lot of that with the letters between the postmasters and Farley and stuff like that?
No, not much.
Oh,
Very little. That's very hard to get. There is a lot of information in um, at the Postal Museum in Washington, um, on flights, particularly some of the flight schedules and so on. Uh, but a lot of that information is very difficult to get, and I have some correspondence, but mostly it's correspondence that was sent to collectors and so on, uh, or postmasters where they were circularized. For example, in North Carolina, telling them how many cities were pickup cities, which cities were the pickup cities, and adding cities and deleting cities and so on, and telling them what the rules were. You better have your airplane there, or you better have your mail there very quickly, close to the time of departure, because the plane isn't going to be there long, and that kind of stuff.
So it
yeah.
worked like the cities were, or the cities and towns, they'd have a pickup once by the private pilot who would then take it to the drop off. Is that how it worked?
Usually once, but sometimes there were two pickups.
Okay.
But more often than not, it was one time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, of course, because of the fact that other cities around were bringing their mail into the pickup spots, you can't get the number of different covers just by the number of pickup cities, because it's much greater than the number of pickup cities, because those other towns were bringing in their cachet covers as well.
Okay.
So there's been an estimate made that there are 12,000 different cachets. That's not counting varieties, but how accurate that is, I don't know. Farley,
Is there any data
Farley,
that it worked, that airmail picked up? I mean, can they show a significant increase in airmail usage?
oh yeah,
Okay.
during that week,
I
it
mean
was
the week, yeah, the
tremendous.
week, but after that, did it, after the hype was over?
I think it stayed somewhat higher. It
Okay.
got people used to using it. And by the way, Farley's collection that he turned over to the Smithsonian was something like 7,300 covers. So that gives you an idea. I mean, it's claimed that there are 12,000, and not all of them. Of course, Farley didn't get all of them sent to him. That was just what was 7,300 of what was sent to him. So, I mean, some of those towns that had really, really weak covers, I don't imagine they would be too proud of them and wouldn't send them in.
Yeah.
I didn't show some of the crudest ones. There's one that I've got that says is a rubber stamp, that it's a regular rubber stamp that says by airmail, and then below the guy has written in pen National Airmail Week, or above National Airmail Week, and then the dates. So
Johnny come lately.
yeah, and that may have been the official cachet for that little town.
Might have been the only one.
Yeah, and I've got another envelope that says where the collector has obviously requested that the postmaster stamp the cachet on the envelope when he sends it out, and the postmaster has written on the and autograph it, and the postmaster has written on the envelope, "Sorry, this town doesn't have a cachet," and then signs it.
But that's so collectible, it really
But
adds
still,
to it.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's
Yeah.
collectible. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Nice.
Just because they don't have a cachet doesn't mean they're not National Airmail Week. So,
Well, it sounds like a lot of people got into it. The towns.
oh, it was
Encouraging
tremendous. There was a great deal of excitement, and the newspapers stoked that, and all the contests and stuff. And it has been said that National Airmail Week was important in lining up the country, getting the mental groundwork there for people doing some big project together, like they would be required to do during the Second World War, for example.
Yeah.
And so it was important in that regard too.
Yeah. And a break from the depression.
Yeah, and a
Here's
break
something
from
we can
the
have some fun with,
depression. Yep.
It
Yep.
wasn't expensive, and it was collectibles. Really good. Jim, was that cover of yours? Was that a penalty cover?
That was from Connecticut Committee to the post office. Let me see if I can get it in.
Okay, yeah, it is a penalty
Yeah.
cover. Nice.
Yep.
Okay, what's the date? What's the date on it?
May 10th, 1938.
Okay.
Yeah, just before National Airmail Week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was correspondence between the postmasters and
That might have contained flimsies.
made of what?
Contained flimsies. Those impressions of the cachets on banding paper. I've got a number of those covers that are between postmasters like that.
Yeah, I have one from DC going to Hartford, Connecticut, and inside is the copy of the letter from Farley telling them how to go about and requesting that they put all extra efforts out to make sure this is that it's a very successful event and everything else.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to put them together after your last meeting, and I got tied up and put a lot of things.
Very good. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just curious. That stack is just a quick grab of my
You're set, huh?
out of the Airmail Week.
Did you say anything familiar on the screen tonight?
Oh yes, I recognize some of the sites and some of the cities in the aluminum one.
Yeah. The Messina one is very common.
Yeah.
What is not common from Messina is the rubber stamped one, because of course the rubber stamp can't look like the printed one.
Yeah. That was the one with aluminum in the paint in the ink.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The rubber stamp is much bigger. It's a bigger square.
Is that up in northern? Is that northern New York,
Yeah,
Messina?
yeah,
It sounds familiar.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I have some covers from Lebanon County that I was going to show and tell.
Go ahead.
And let me see, I haven't done this for a while. But here we go. Oh, now my stuff's in the way here. These are all available on the Society's website. If you scroll down a little bit, there's a display that was put together by one of the former presidents of the club, who passed away in 1989, but his family just recently disposed of his collection. So Dick Kohlberg, who was in charge of that, found these covers in there. And since they're pretty much club history or whatever, they're now part of the club archives. And gee whiz, I'm on this small computer screen. Find it hard to navigate. I apologize.
So was Erwin Hershkowitz in the Lebanon Club?
Yeah, he was there we go. He was the president for a while actually. I think Dick might have actually taken care over after him. Dick's been the president for over like 40 years.
Yeah, long time.
So, but yeah, all this stuff you can see on the website. I didn't take any notes for this presentation, but even if I did, I would have discarded them because I learned so much about these covers tonight for listening to Jim talk. And I did try to research National Airmail Week in Lebanon County, but for some reason, the newspaper from Lebanon is not available for 1938. So I wasn't really even able to find out a whole lot about, what ceremonies might have taken place or anything like that. But I will show you quickly these covers. This is a cover from Annville, Pennsylvania, and as you can see, it's got one of those stock National Airmail Week stamps. Here's a cover from Campbelltown. Campbelltown, most of these post offices are still in operation, but these are all smaller towns, so it's pretty remarkable. Well, it says a lot about the scope of National Airmail Week that these post offices even had cachets. But here's another one of those stock cachets. This one has the Pennsylvania Keystone on it.
By the way, one of the biggest competitions I have for National Airmail Week covers are postmark collectors.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes that's the only way they can get the postmark.
Wow.
They don't care that it's National Airmail Week. They just want the postmark.
That's cool. Here's
It's
another
like postcard collectors. They don't care what's on the back, but stamp collectors do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yet another stock stamp, rubber stamp. And this was from Cornwall, Pennsylvania. Here's a picture of the plane. John L. Yinks was the pilot's name, and Daniel Lee Walter was the postmaster. I assume that's the postmaster there talking with the pilot. It's a good shot of his plane. I'll see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Oh, there's actually three people there. Here's the Lebanon cachet, and this was obviously the biggest post office in the county. The cachet was sponsored by the Philatelic Collectors Club of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, who was the forerunner of the Lebanon Stamp Club. They sponsored the cachet. The cachet was designed by Henry Richter. I believe at the time he was the president of the club, and you're actually going to see a picture or two of him further down here. And there are two in this exhibit because you can see that they're different colors. They appear to be a rubber stamp too.
Yep. That was by far the commonest means of adding the cachets.
Very good. So there's a cachet from Myerstown. That's a rubber stamp. The strike isn't very good. I have a much nicer copy of this that was in another another club member's collection. Here's another picture, and that picture might look familiar.
Yeah, I had that in my presentation.
Yeah, I'm glad you found it. So there they are in the middle of the field. John Yingst is the pilot. Henry Richter, the cachet director, and the guy that the president of the club, Daniel Walter, Lebanon postmaster, and Robert Light, who was the assistant postmaster in Lebanon. And I'm guessing these were Richter's pictures that somehow or another, Mr. Herc, as he was affectionately known as, that Herc got a hold of at some point. And again, it's really nice to have this because this is history of our club, and that's one of the reasons why I shared it with the rest of you guys via the website. Here's a Newmanstown cachet, another rubber stamp. Fort Zeller was or is still a landmark from the old Indian War days. It's a private residence, but I've driven by it before. It's still there. Newmanstown is another one of those really small post offices that it's a wonder it survived to this day, but there is still a Newmanstown post office. Here's a photo caption County Postmasters. You can see the pilots there. The rest of them, I assume, just about all of them were there for the big ceremony, and I hope to someday maybe find a news report of the festivities. Yet another stamp, probably yet another stock stamp from Richland. And I'm not even sure if Richland still has a post office. I would assume that they do. But they're a little bit to the east of Myerstown, if you're familiar with Lebanon County. Here's part of the ceremony where they're swearing in the pilot. And of course, that's Mr. Yinks there. And I think that's the postmaster. Oh, there they are. The postmaster and the assistant postmaster standing behind a microphone. Here's a cachet from Quentin, Pennsylvania. This one is actually signed by the pilot, and it's actually addressed to Henry B. Richer. Sorry, I was pronouncing his name wrong. It's not Richter, it's Richer. But was interesting to me because another Quentin cachet ended up on back when we had Lebpex, it ended up on the Lebpex show cover in 1997. This cover, I actually have this cover. This used to be in the collection of Glenn Blauck, one of my philatelic mentors who has since passed on. There was an insert. I'm not going to read the whole insert, but part of the insert said this cover was postmarked in Quentin, PA, and addressed to Cornwall, PA. The Quentin post office and the Cornwall post office are only 2 miles apart, so it was unlikely that it was ever flown. And actually, here's the original cachet. But obviously, this cover has the pilot's signature on it. So I know you mentioned, Jim, that there were ceremonial flights and whatnot, and this was undoubtedly flown somewhere. I have to go do a little bit more research and see if I can figure out what all the flight places were in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That was a nice little thing to discover in this little presentation here. And finally, here's the cachet for Schaefferstown. According to a report that I saw in the Ephrata newspaper in Lancaster County, Schaefferstown's National Airmail Week cachet was the award-winning cachet for Pennsylvania. Kind of like we saw the award winner for Connecticut in Jim's presentation. This was Pennsylvania's. Again, I have a better copy of this one that was in Glenn's collection, but it says first chartered waterworks in the U.S., and you can kind of make it out right there. And that's kind of Schaefferstown's claim to fame. And I have one addendum before I end my show and tell. This is what the covers look like in Glenn's pages. Here's a cover of Cornwall, again with that rubber stamp there, again signed by the pilot, sent to Henry Richer in Lebanon. Below it on this page is Palmyra's, and as you can see, Palmyra used an adhesive label on their cover. It was signed by postmaster Alfred Yeiser and also sent to Henry Richer. So I guess Glenn ended up with a lot of his covers somehow. But this one is interesting because it was only recently, maybe like a month or two ago, when I was looking through these, that I realized that this Palmyra cover was not in Herc's collection. So Glenn had a cover that Herc didn't have. But Herc pretty much had a lot of the Lebanon County post offices covered. And, there may be another cover from a small post office, which I may run into again or not, but it kind of gives me hope that there might be more information or more covers out there to see.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
That's a nice
Jim,
find. Really nice.
I hope you can see this one. This was from the postmaster to the stamp club for the Airmail Week, National Airmail Week.
What stamp club was it, Jim?
It was to the Northampton Stamp Club from the Somerville, Mass. Post Office Department. But overall, it's a nice looking cover to be on the standard brown post office mail. And this one here from New Haven, Connecticut to the postmaster in Arlington, Connecticut. And it looks just like a normal cover, nothing fancy on it. But inside it had the postmaster's Patrick Good letter to the postmaster there explaining. I can, Jim, if you want, I can copy this later and send it through email to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.